right. Let's see if this works. You're not too early, AI Jackie. Oh, this is all crooked. Oh my god. Let's make sure that that's more stable. Okay. I think we're live. Welcome back to Tailosive EV, live on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. It's my favorite live stream of the week, Wednesday. Wednesday is for EVs. So maybe if schedules permitting, we might be able to stream more in the future. I don't know. We'll find out. But we have a couple of things to talk about today. I just want to repeat myself because I still see comments about this every week. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. On Wednesdays, we like to do a 1 hour, hour and a half EV stream, and we're not restricted to only talking about what's in the title or thumbnail. You got to put something in the title and thumbnail, and because the live streams are incredibly, very much dictated by the chat and dictated by what you guys ask, it's impossible for me to predict what I should put in the title and thumbnail. So just to kick off the live stream, just to kick off subjects, that's typically what I put up there. So no, it's not an hour and a half long video about Lucid having a recall, but that's what the first subject, ideally, if my live streams don't have any technical difficulties, that's typically what the first subject is just going to be on, is what's in the title and thumbnail. Yeah, that's kind of a funny one in my opinion. My wife and I were actually chatting about it a bit because all leading up to the first Lucid Air deliveries, Peter Rawlinson wanted to brag and boast nonstop about how they wanted to have this huge emphasis at their Arizona factory on quality control. How everything's just about precision and everything being so precise and so perfect and everything is done just right. Everything has to be so ironed out and so well thought out and so perfect. And they were, I think, at least how I interpreted a lot of Lucid's marketing, was just trying to put this big emphasis on, you know, kind of Tesla has been known for kind of ramping up vehicles too quickly and having quality control and having panel gaps. And Lucid was trying to kind of lean in the opposite direction of, we're going for luxury, we're going for expensive, we're going for the rich, high-end demographic, and that's why we have the best quality control, and that's why we put so much extra work and so much extra effort towards making sure these vehicles are built well and they're built super reliably. And I guess what today's message is, to kick off the stream with, no one is immune to quality control issues, no matter how much money, no matter how much time, especially if you're during a ramp-up electric vehicle transition. You really can't avoid it. There is always just going to be some hiccups when you're developing a new platform, a new EV. There's going to be some problems. And they've officially filed this recall, and no, it is not a software-related recall before everyone freaks out. Just like, well, Tesla has recalls all the time. It's like, well, most of them are over-the-air, or at least a very large percentage of the ones that are reported are over-the-air updates that, for some reason, the NHTSA considers a recall, even though it's just an update. I think, personally, we should emphasize with recalls that they are literally a call to require you to return the vehicle to a service center. I don't consider a software update a recall personally, so I wish that definition would stop being misused. But yeah, this is an actual hardware recall where they need to bring the vehicles back, or at least inspect them. John Rittinger has a Lucid Air, and he had a mobile service technician come out, and he said it took under an hour to make sure that his vehicle was safe and okay, but according to Lucid, this did impact 200 vehicles. I don't believe Lucid has officially disclosed how many deliveries there have been, but while 200 doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of when Tesla has a recall, it usually impacts thousands of vehicles, or when Ford has a recall, it impacts tens of thousands of vehicles. With Lucid, I don't believe they've delivered 1,000 vehicles yet. I think they might be looking, I mean, I'm not sure if they'll probably detail it on their next earnings call, which is in a couple days. But as far as I'm aware, Lucid has probably delivered somewhere between maybe 500 and 600 vehicles. There's John Rittinger. Yeah, I was just telling your story, John, about how you didn't have an issue. But thanks for joining the stream. I'm happy not everyone has an issue with the recall, but it's just a proof that I don't, again, I'm not trying to say the company's dead or something, or the company's in trouble. I'm just saying any startup, any ramp up production for any new, especially electric vehicle company, there's going to be problems. It doesn't matter if it's a $40,000 EV, doesn't matter if it's a $170,000 EV. I also was just watching Kevin Paffrath has a Lucid Air, and he had to get his towed. He had to get some service on his, unrelated to the recall. It was not about the issue that had got. Oh, John says 300 to 400 delivered. The recalled cars should be less than 3. Oh, thanks, John. NHTSA said that they were checking individually 200. At least that's the one I'm reporting on. But Kevin was having issues with his power steering when pulling out of the driveway, so he had to get his looked into as well, for a different issue, not related. Yeah, there's always going to be problems no matter what or who. I agree with you. You have to remember that the term recall has been used for a super long time. Things being able to be fixed over the air is pretty new. I agree it is, but I'm just saying that the definition is absolutely misused. You know, if there's a patch or a bug or something and Apple sends out a software update to their iPhones, we don't call that a recall, right? It's like, as technology is finding its way into more and more of our vehicles, I do think that there should be, at least in journalism side of things, I know that on paper we might have to have some technical thing. Well, it's technically a recall because they issued this required change and Tesla patched it with an update. But the media loves to use that term recall far more. Like, okay, it might on paper be a recall, but how come we have to get 50 news organizations all reporting at the same time? Tesla recalls 400,000 vehicles, or Tesla recalls 20,000 vehicles, when they're actually reporting on a software update. So my sanity needs a recall. Exactly. Yeah, it's called growing pains. Exactly. So I just want to emphasize mostly in this video that yes, I understand and I completely acknowledge Tesla has quality control issues. Tesla has recalls. Tesla sometimes manufactures things and they need to be fixed. But what I mainly wanted this to be the takeaway from with the Lucid having its first recall, and as John mentioned, they've only delivered 300 or 400. It's really in the early stages, and there's already hardware issues that they're looking into. And the few owners that do have an online presence have been reporting on some of the issues. Although I'm looking forward to Rettinger's review. No one is perfect here. It doesn't matter how slow you are to market. Lucid Air faced tons and tons of delays before they reached it to market. Doesn't matter what the price of the vehicle is. There's growing pains, as you call it. There's going to be things that you discover when you're a new company, particularly. But even if you're an old company jumping into electric vehicles, you're probably going to be engineering and mass producing something that you haven't engineered or mass produced before. Doesn't matter if you have 100 years of combustion engine experience, it doesn't necessarily translate to electric vehicle production ramping. That's why the Mach-E, which is from Ford, has had recalls, and I'm sure the F-150 Lightning will probably have recalls too when it comes out. New and old will have recalls. Nothing's made perfectly. Even Apple products have some recalls. It's true. Absolutely. It's the breakout star of the Tech Podcast. Yay, Mike made it. Trevor Scott says, can we talk about the Ford recall that will receive zero news? 330,000 Mustangs have a physical hardware recall. Yeah, I hate that we have to specify now the difference between a software recall, which is literally just an update, and a physical hardware recall. Can the media just not call it a recall if it's a software patch? And I'm not trying to be biased towards Tesla in that regard. If Lucid issues a software update, I'm not going to call that a recall either. Same thing. Drew should definitely talk about the Sandy interview. Sandy even spoke on Cybertruck production. Yeah, I saw the clips. I was just watching Monroe's. I want to just complain a little bit about something here. Sandy Monroe's great. I'm not complaining about him. I'm complaining about the people reporting on Sandy. Because Sandy obviously is an expert and he has tons of years of experience, and I think his opinion should value more than any of ours personally because of how much mass production he's gone through. I'm just an idiot on the internet talking into my smartphone. Don't listen to me. I'm not an expert on anything really, but I think there's too many Tesla bulls that always want to talk about whenever Sandy says something nice about Tesla, and then they always pretend Sandy's criticisms don't exist. I watched the channel. I was just watching, in case you weren't aware, his breakdown on his disappointment with the plaid doors, not using the single piece modular design that they used on the Model Y, and instead using a stick built approach with the Model S doors, which is far more complicated and it takes far much more time on the assembly line. And if you watch Monroe live pretty frequently, you'll know that he actually does criticize Tesla fairly often. I mean, he praises them too, yes. And that's what everyone loves talking about. Look, Sandy Monroe likes Tesla. Look what he said about the powertrain. Look what he said about the Cybertruck. Yes, overall, he is a fan at the end of the day. I think most reasonable people would acknowledge that Tesla has done something special, and Tesla is unique in how they were able to ramp their EVs, and they were not the first to electric cars, but they were first to mainstream electric cars. So that's just a normal, logical human perspective. If you are trying to pass Tesla off as they aren't actually that special, anyone could have done that, I think you're personally, if you just look at the facts and logic, I think you're a little bit pessimistic if you try to discredit Tesla's accomplishments and just act like, well, any company could have done that. The truth is, still, tons of companies haven't done what Tesla has done. But I do certainly think that whenever Sandy talks about something in a positive light, you see it on Solving the Money Problem, you see it in all the headlines, you see it in all the, pro-Tesla websites, which is fine, but I think we should also acknowledge that Sandy has a lot of advice and does criticize Tesla pretty frequently, and I don't think the Tesla polls bring that up enough. So because I'm trying to be the content creator that I want to see, I'm going to bring that up and just say, it seems like they could have done a lot better with the door manufacturing design. Not that it's like, a crucial safety issue or something that's going to be the cause of a lot of recalls, but just watching his teardown on the door design and how dated it was compared to the Model Y design, which Sandy was reviewing a Model Y from 2020, whereas he's reviewing a plaid Model S in 2022, and it still has dated manufacturing approaches. So I don't know what the answer is. I didn't see much speculation on Sandy's part as to why they did that, because that's probably not his job. I'm probably a lot better at speculation. That's kind of my full-time job, is speculating on what Tesla will do. My theory is that there were so many issues and there was so much delays and holdups with the plaid powertrain development and trying to get this new interior to work. Not just the interior of the door panel, but I mean, like just the display, the yoke, and the auto shift, and all of these changes with the powertrain, with the updated gills on the front, with the wider stance. And they were so distracted with all the other changes with the Model S that it was just going to take freaking too much time for them to re-engineer the manufacturing approach of the doors on the Model S. And that's probably what got thrown to the back of like, yeah, the Tesla team, as we already know, based on how they build the Model Y, we're already well aware of how you could build the door cheaper, you could build it more sturdy, you could make it more reliable, and it has nothing to do with, well, I guess, yeah, it's low volume manufacturing efficiency is less important, but so if you're gonna have a modular door design, it makes more sense to do it on a Model Y or 3. Model S, the advantages are not as high, but still, Sandy was talking about how it helps with reliability and it helps with assembly, catching up on orders and increasing the overall run rate of the factory, which is an issue with the Model S and X because they are super delayed and postponed. So it may have just not been on the priority list, and I think Tesla might be intentionally building the dated stick-built doors because they know they didn't have time to re-engineer that, so they just had to focus on getting these vehicles out the door before they re-engineered all those little intricacies. But yeah, he's complained about other things in the past. When he did his teardown on the Model 3, he had a lot of complaints as to why they didn't make the internal chassis as good as the Model Y, although he did get to explain that a bit when he interviewed Elon, and Elon just said, yeah, there's a lot of changes we'd like to make with the Model 3, but we can't stop the assembly line when the backlog is this long and it's such a crucial part of the company's revenue stream. You can't just shut down the factory for a couple weeks and update everything. So Elon's word was, it's hard to change the wheels on the bus when it's going 80 miles an hour. So the self-presenting doors are still a thing on the X, correct? It kind of sucks that this recall had basically nothing to do with them per se. Basically, a supplier bunch botched a certain piece they're using, so it's not even on them. No, I disagree. It is on them. It doesn't really matter if a supplier botched a certain piece because it's the company that is selling the product's job to ensure that they bought from the proper suppliers and that all of the components in the vehicle are working correctly. So I wouldn't. It sounds like Samsung with the Note 7. You know, they were trying to pull the whole, oh, it wasn't our fault. It was the battery supplier's fault. That it's like, well, shouldn't you have caught that in your testing? Same thing with Lucid. I don't think you can push that off as, well, one of their suppliers messed up. It's like, I think you should have. I think you should have known that your supplier messed up. Because if you would have, then you wouldn't need to worry about doing a recall. Christian, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thanks for the super chat. When I go to blind seminar, they refuse to talk Tesla. That's too bad. I wish they would talk about it. I think it's fun. That's why we're here, right? Because we like chatting Tesla. Even so, Tesla is all about continuous improvement. The door approach to the Y can be folded into the S eventually. I sure hope it does. Just because it seemed, as what Sandy was describing, there were a lot of advantages, both in cost savings, but also in overall product rigidity and reliability. You know, the best part is no part. The best process is no process. Words from Tesla, you'd think they would be applying that to their own vehicles. And I guess what I'm more confused about is like, the Model S did go through a shutdown, right? They had like a solid 4 or 5 months to update the assembly line and introduce some new things. And when there's big door updated approaches to manufacturing to be made, it might require another shutdown before they implement that again. So it's kind of one of those things where someone is an expert in explaining how something could be done better, and I think we should pay attention to the good, yes, but also the bad. Let's see. You have to remember that Sandy is a hardware/manufacturing expert, so he's looking at Tesla by their build quality, but also the process used to build the vehicles. Yes, he's incredibly intelligent and has a whole lot of experience in that field, which is why I think his opinion matters quite a bit. Yeah, please stop talking about the Tesla phone. It's not happening. Oh my God. Let's see. I'd use the term recall if there's a hardware change needed for reliability or safety reasons. Yeah, I think I would too. The recall was. I mean, most people, when they think recall, they think of all the vehicles going back somewhere to be worked on. Now that we have mobile service, even that definition can be stretched. It's like a recall, but the car company comes out to where you're parked and fixes the issue on the spot. Yeah, it's. I don't know. Let's see. What was your reaction on the Windows 12? I didn't get. We'll talk about that on Talos of Tech. Let's keep it to EV here. Yes, Baron, I have a video about that coming up shortly. The self-presenting doors are still a thing. Did you see the S infotainment teardown? The hardware is sort of there, tilting the display. It's just missing 2 motors and a couple screws. Yeah, I did briefly see that right before going live. I'm confused by that because I remember someone claiming that it was going to be like a software update and over the air through a recall they were going to make it so you could swivel the center display in the Model S and X, but based on the hinges I saw in the teardown, it does not look like it would swivel that much. And also, I have no clue why they wouldn't have that at launch. What are they waiting for exactly? Wouldn't they rather just have that at like, what software are you waiting? We don't have the software to figure out how to make this go back and forth yet. It's like there were references to it when the first Model S and X refresh came out, but yeah, it never actually turned into anything. Let's see. I imagine it wasn't important. They were really late on the refresh. I guess so. It's a good thing they only have a few car to recall. Well, all I'm trying to say here is, even if the checkup on the vehicle on Lucid's recall is quick, it still has to be done on like half of the vehicles that they've delivered, right? Like they've delivered, according to Rettinger here in the chat, that they've delivered somewhere between 300 and 400 cars. And this recall it's a hardware one, is impacting over 200 vehicles. So like nearly all of them. close to all of them, but I'm glad that not everybody has the issue. Like, I'm hoping that the vast majority of cars that actually have to go in is few, but just with the small number of deliveries we've had thus far, we still are seeing several of them get worked on. Kilowatt said they spotted a Lucid Air Dream Edition at the Brooks Motor Cars in Oakland. The owner hit a deep pothole at speed and deformed the wheel just a bit. Oh, okay. There's just a regular tire change. But yeah, I was watching Kevin Paffrath's video about the power steering acting up. So it's like, these are, I mean, it's a small sample size, right? We're reporting on a couple of people. I've seen certain people complain about software that wasn't available on the Dream Editions at launch. Others now seeing this recall. Others having issues with power steering. They're small, isolated instances, but when you consider that there have only been a couple hundred vehicles delivered, it's like, how is this going to scale when there's thousands of vehicles delivered? I don't personally think Lucid's quality control is going to be as bad as Tesla's. Personally, I don't think Tesla's as bad as people make it out to be, but like, I think Lucid probably, I could be wrong, but based on their bragging in marketing and how they emphasized quality control at their factories and their assembly processes and stuff, I personally think like they will spend more time on quality control than Tesla will, because Lucid's mission statement and goals really don't have much to do with ramping up production very quickly, and they're all about just being luxurious and being a smaller piece of the market, and they're trying to emphasize like the best materials and the best quality you can imagine. So because of that, they're probably going to spend more time on the assembly line and making sure everything is right. But as we're finding out only a couple months after first deliveries, that doesn't make them immune to quality control problems and recalls, and even if you're spending $180,000 on a car, you can still have these problems. Lucid's earnings call is to happen on the 28th. Will you be listening? I've listened to some in the past, not live, but I've listened to some Lucid earnings calls in the past, and I don't find them particularly interesting. They usually don't drop big numbers in those. This channel, it's it's no secret, we definitely primarily focus on Tesla, and there will be tiny changes with Tesla's vehicles that I report on, and big changes with other companies' vehicles that I don't report on. But that's just because I'm honestly just trying my best to accurately review and analyze the EV market as a whole. And I think Tesla is most of the EV market, just because Model 3s and Model Ys are selling at these insane volumes, and there's an insane amount of demand. If you go look at most searched EVs by country, it's basically a toss-up between like Cybertruck and Roadster. So yes, there are definitely more EVs in the total market than Tesla, but the general market interest follows Tesla more than it does any other EV maker. Which is what I try to reflect on my channel. It's like primarily diving into Tesla news, Tesla updates. And yeah, we occasionally talk about other EVs as well, but I noticed very quickly with viewership and watch time that the videos about Tesla, even the minor updates, are far more interesting than the big updates from normal EV automakers. I get far more views talking about what's going to go on with a Cybertruck or what changes are coming to the Model 3 and Y than I do in-person videos with the Hyundai Ioniq 5 or test driving the Mustang Mach-E. It's like, I can try to cover those other brands, but it definitely doesn't get as much attention because there's just not as much demand for it. I did see Tesla officially release the $99 a year. Will you get it on yours? I don't think so, because I honestly was not planning on paying for premium connectivity anyway. It's nice that there is an annual option. Maybe if I get the car and start using it, I'll realize that it's actually really nice to have. But from the beginning, we're kind of anti-membership. We try not to have too many monthly costs stack up, because I think there's just far too many services these days anyway. And I do have some hotspot data off my phone, so I believe if I want to stream music or if I want to use internet in the car through the browser and stuff, I would probably just go off the hotspot of my phone, because that's a lot cheaper than paying $10 a month. 99 a year is better, but it's a larger commitment. The other alternative, similar to FSD, that I've considered is like, if we're going to go on a road trip and we're going to be in the car a lot, I'll pay for premium connectivity on that month. And then on a month where we're away or not driving the car very much, I won't pay for premium connectivity. And therefore, if you pay for it annually, it's the equivalent of paying for it for 10 months and then getting 2 months free. Whereas if I only paid for it 3 months out of the year, that's still going to be way cheaper than annual. So I was happy to see my price prediction was correct, though, because there was references to it in Tesla Scope's analysts of the analyzing the software. They were like, oh, they're referencing annual options. And I was like, hey, traditionally, when you have an annual option versus monthly, they make 2 years free. That's how it goes. So I just guessed in my title and thumbnail that would be $99 yearly. And I mean, it was a safe prediction, but that prediction ended up being correct, which is kind of cool. So Model Y Mike actually sent me a video. He was paying for premium connectivity, so he subscribed to it annually because Tesla gets a bunch of money up front. Everyone who knows they're going to pay for it gets to save money. So why not? It's a no-brainer. It makes too much sense. Yearly subscription is far better. I'm excited for FSD yearly subscription. If it's $2,000 a year, then it's a great value. That's 6 years of ownership to get that to $12,000. It is kind of complicated because that's what I mentioned in my video. Like, it would take 6 years before it would be worth it to buy outright, and that's a long time. But people did mention that, okay, in 6 years, the price is most likely going to change. 6 years is a long time. We're talking about 2028. Do we really think that the monthly price of FSD is going to remain the same in 2028? I don't think that's probably a safe bet either. Elon said that they weren't going to raise the price on the monthly membership until FSD beta went to wide release, which is... I don't know. It's hard to predict when that wide release will be. Honestly, I think it might be a long time, which is why I'm kind of comfortable not paying $12K for FSD. I actually think long-term, eventually Tesla is going to move everything into pay-as-you-go self-driving, just because business-wise, it's the best to get the smallest possible number in front of someone. And I think that similar to supercharging, originally... in the old days, supercharging was free, and you could buy a Tesla, and it would have free supercharging for life. Now, between all of their vehicles, even the $130,000 Teslas, they don't even get free supercharging for life. Why? Because Tesla realizes it's probably more profitable for them to just have pay-as-you-go supercharging. So, I honestly think that in the long term, we might reach a point where it's like, you plug in. I'm assuming level 3 is going to be where it kind of stops. There's a chance that level 4 and level 5 will start happening. It's just hearing Mike talk about FSD beta 10.10.2 being bumpy and being the worst he's ever had, and seeing the miles driven without intervention. It's, again, watching these FSD beta videos and experiencing FSD beta for myself. I'm pretty confident that a lot of these updates are 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and I think 10.10.2 is one of those 2 steps back, 1 step forward type updates. The development of self-driving, as much as Tesla bulls love to say, oh, it'll be done later this year, oh yeah, by the end of this year, if we just take a step back and look at how long it's taken to get better and to improve, I don't see it being level 4 next year. I don't see it being level 4 in 2 years. I'd love to be proven wrong. I would be happy to be included in one of those clips of like, Drew is wrong. Look at this time he doubted FSD. It's like, that's fine. You can doubt it all you want. But the fact has not changed that Elon has said FSD would be completely like autonomous by next year for like 6 years. And it's still going. So in the future, when we're level 3, I think that when you plug in a destination on the car, there will just be a little pricing button next to navigate that says, the navigate says, it'll take 10 minutes to get there, and we'll charge you $4 to let the car drive you there by itself. Elon already alluded to the fact in a tweet to Omar recently that they were going to switch the autopilot software to the same code as FSD beta. Not that FSD beta would magically become free. It's just the visualization of the beta would be available on autopilot as well. And autopilot would still be restricted to just lane keep and adaptive cruise control. You know, it's not going to do turds and stuff, but you'd be able to look at the visualization and realize the car is seeing all of that, and it can do a lot more. It's just not because you only have autopilot. So I'm not saying FSD will become free. It's just essentially they're going to make it as easy as possible to turn it on at any given moment. And instead of like, you can buy FSD outright at once, instead it's going to just be, we'll drive the car to your destination for $10. You know, it's like, if you don't feel like driving, just tap this one button and it charges you by the mile. And if not by the mile, then the monthly membership will become more and more popular because Tesla will realize that's probably more profitable in the long run and more digestible. That's the term. There's a far higher likelihood that a bunch of people driving Teslas would tap a button that says, you know, drive me here for $4. Or, you know, occasionally on a nice weekend, Tesla's like, hey, we'll drive you here for free. So they give you a little taste. They try to get you hooked on FSD. But the number of people that are like, yeah, I could drop $12,000 on a software package, that's already got to be at a very low level. There's very few people that are just like, yeah, sure, 12 grand, I'll drop it. But if you could tell them $200 for a month, okay, that's get a free road trip. You know, you pay $200 and now the car does all the driving for you. It's a lot more relaxing because you can be on your phone or you could watch movies or shows on the screen. I just think that would probably collect a lot more revenue. I think Tesla should have a supercharging subscription, X dollars a month for unlimited supercharging. That would be interesting. I've talked about it in previous videos, but it would be challenging to figure out like how you price that so that Tesla doesn't lose too much on it. I guess they're kind of comfortable. Like, they lose money on this annual premium connectivity option. It would be far cheaper to just charge people monthly. But they decided to offer it, I think, because Tesla gets a more upfront, you know, you get more money at once type thing, but you lose money in the long run. So I don't know. Maybe they would be comfortable doing that with supercharging. But at the end of the day, there would still be like late fees. So if you or idle charge fees. So like if you stayed at the supercharger for too long, they would still have to bill you because you're taking up a space that someone else could use. So let's see. Stops at level 3 forever. Wow. I think that the vast majority of autonomy is going to stop around level 3. I think that Waymo is a very, very, very loose definition of level 4. And so far, while Tesla has grown a lot in terms of what the vehicle can do, they have not grown at all in terms of liability, which is what you have to do in order to hit level 3 or level 4. And after all these years of autopilot and self-driving and all these price hikes and all of this AI day stuff and all these neural net training, they have not assumed an inch of liability in all these years of development. If I start see them assuming more liability, I'll believe we're close. But so far they are not we have not seen any possible development in terms of, it's actually regressed in terms of responsibility on the driver. Before, you used to just turn on autopilot and you were done. Then they started saying, oh, that's too dangerous. People are going to abuse it. You have to keep your hands on the wheel. And then it's going to nag you every 30 seconds to, you know, apply pressure. And then that wasn't enough because Consumer Reports tried to, you know, catch Tesla in a scandal, say, see, the car's driving by itself, this is dangerous. So now they have the eye tracking and the hands on the wheel thing. Tesla is pushing more liability to the driver over time, not less. And we need to start seeing liability go the other way before I start believing that level 4 is even obtainable. In case you weren't aware, level 4 is actually likely the far more robo-taxi scenario. Level 5 is almost impossible, depending on your definition. The 5 levels of basically level 5 would imply that the car can drive anywhere a human can without a driver. That's a little bit of a weird definition because sometimes humans do off-roading, and how a car could perform off-roading autonomously, it doesn't really, I don't think that would work very well. Um, and also there's a lot of places where humans don't even drive well, so do you count that as the car also has to drive well there? Level 4 means that the car can drive without a driver in the driver's seat, but there's geofences, which is what Waymo is. Very, very, like, they drive within 50 square miles, and they drive on very straight, very basic roads that are very easy and pre-mapped by Google's hardware, and it's not scalable at all. It's very expensive. So level 4, in the loose definition, I think might work in cities where Tesla's like, okay, within San Francisco or within the Fremont area, you can take a Tesla, it'll pick you up and drive you to your destination and drop you off. But even then, I think the liability and complexity of letting everyday Tesla owners opt their vehicle into robotaxis is going to be so problematic because all Teslas right now don't have steer-by-wire, which means anyone who gets in the car can grab the steering wheel or take over the vehicle. So now anyone who opts their Tesla into the robotaxi network is technically letting a stranger get in the car and if they want to drive it. Yeah, Tesla drives in heavy snow all the time. It's true. You got to have LiDAR for bad weather. A camera can't self-drive through a blizzard. No, LiDAR does terrible in the rain. LiDAR is not helpful at all because, it's occasionally helpful, but it doesn't push us closer to level 4 because, for one, the rain just completely demolishes the advantages of LiDAR. Sandy Monroe has talked about that as well. And the main issue right now with figuring out autonomous driving, especially with Teslas, is perception and understanding what to do. It's not so much like it can't see that thing in front of it. It's like it can see that thing. The trick is figuring out how to handle that situation, how to handle this pedestrian, how to handle these speeds and these complex scenarios on the go, without any pre-mapping software. That's the challenge, and LiDAR doesn't help solve that at all. LiDAR is just about how far away is that object. It doesn't tell you what that object is. It doesn't really tell you where that object is going, and that's what all of the algorithm training is with FSD beta. So, no, LiDAR doesn't really fix anything. Let's see. If FSD has a value of $100,000, I don't think anyone will buy it outright. I don't think Tesla will even sell it outright, maybe for big companies, but a monthly subscription will be the only way. Perhaps. I always thought Elon said that when he meant FSD is worth $100,000, he was like, basically the alternative is you hire a dedicated driver to drive you around. I don't think he meant that the price of FSD would actually cost $100,000. He just meant that the equivalent of this software outside of Tesla would be $100,000 because you'd have to hire your own driver. So I never processed that as, it's going to cost $100,000 one day. Yes, it's very expensive, but I think long before you hit 100,000, you would have a flat line of sales, especially if full self-driving is not at level 4 yet and it's $20,000, $30,000. No one would be buying it. I'm sorry. Essentially no one. Maybe you would get like 5 sales a year, but that's basically not worth keeping around. LiDAR is helpful for depth. Tesla went a pseudo LiDAR route with just vision. Yeah, well, once you solve the vision problem, LiDAR becomes redundant. Which in case of Tesla's, the limiting factor is vision. It's not LiDAR. So the reward is far greater if you can figure out a way to make autonomous vehicles without LiDAR. There's a huge payoff for that. If you find out that LiDAR is required, then that's a big disadvantage. That's a big issue. It's like, oh crap, we got to mass produce LiDAR and put them on all our vehicles because that's going to be far more expensive. And also that means it's not going to work well in the rain. So yeah, LiDAR is only good for geofencing. I don't even really think it helps much with geofencing. What Waymo and Zoox are doing is kind of like really cool science projects because they have to do it within controlled environments. But that means that when those environments change, which they do, cities go under construction and there's tough weather and there's things blowing across the street. when there's any type of variable, suddenly your system doesn't work very well. So whatever Waymo and Zoox are working on, it's never really going to become a very permanent solution. It's always just going to be kind of a cool science trick. Tesla is trying to pursue a permanent solution, which I personally think is going to take way longer than they think. Imagine a car self-driving off-road. You just see an empty car bouncing across a rocky desert. I think Snazzy Labs mentioned in his video that Rivian wanted to try something like that. But I was like, why would you want to? If you're going off-road, it's because you're doing something very technical and specific. I don't think that's the kind of driving you would ever want to do autonomously. Driving on long-distance freeways, like routinely. I've been to the freaking airport 5 times in the last month, picking up people, traveling, coming back, and then like this morning I had to drop my dad off at the airport. If that drive, which I've done a million times, could be done autonomously, it would be far more enjoyable. I don't really know what would be very enjoyable about letting a car decide how to drive off-road. I thought if you're going off-road, it's because you're trying to, have fun and do something different. So you could just take the Tesla fund and buy Tesla stock at a discount. This is not a good environment to buy a car. Right. Well, at a certain point, you gotta have cash, because Tesla will not accept Tesla stock to buy the car. You know what's funny, Jonathan Root, is that everyone told me when I announced the Tesla fund, when I told everyone it was October, I think, of last year, everyone said, hey, you should just put all the money you're saving and put it in Tesla stock. That way you'll save up and get an even better car. You'll save up really fast. The problem is that is all dependent on short-term pricing, which is unpredictable. Don't believe anyone that says they can predict short-term stock prices, because they can't. That's impossible. And as we're planning throughout this year, we've delayed the Tesla purchase countless times. In 2019, we were thinking about doing it, and then we pushed it off and figured, this isn't a good time to buy a Tesla. We need to focus on other things. And 2020 came around, and we were like, the pandemic hit. Let's focus on paying off debt. And, now our house is paid off. So you can always find an excuse. Trust me, a car is one of the least responsible things you can possibly buy in your entire lifetime. There will always be something else you could justify as responsible to invest. At a certain point, you want a car, especially when your old car kind of sucks and you have road trips that you're planning, and you also want to prioritize safety. All a stock can do is give you money or dividends. It can't save your life in a car accident, whereas driving a Tesla and someone hits you or rear ends you, and that might save your life. Whereas if you're driving a traditional gas car like the one I'm currently driving, if I get in a bad wreck in that, the chances of me dying or being severely wounded are much, much higher. So after a certain point in life, you have to kind of just put your foot down and say, I need a car at this point. Yeah, more money would be nice, but that money's not going to drive me anywhere. That money's not going to protect me in an accident. And if I would have listened to all of the countless comments and all of the people when I announced the Tesla plan and said, hey, we're saving up, all of them said, buy Tesla stock now, the Tesla fund would be substantially lower than it is today. Because when I announced the plan, let me check here. When I announced the Tesla plan, I think it was October. Tesla stock was over $1,000. I think when I dropped the plan, it was around $1,100. Now it's at $764. So if we're planning on, buying a Tesla soon, within the next year, before the end of this year is our goal, or at least placing our order in the next couple months because of the backlog, we would have less money now if we would have listened to everyone say, just buy Tesla stock. Yeah, it's very easy to say in the long term, the stock will do better. I agree with that. Like, as the money comes in and as more people realize Tesla's dominance in the market, I think it's fairly easy to guess, because that's the general trend of the stock market anyway. You can buy random stocks. You could buy index funds that are very safe. And yes, over time, they will grow and they will get bigger. But in the short term, especially with Tesla and EV stocks, it's incredibly difficult to predict what's going to happen. So if you're trying to make a plan of like, we need to place an order, we need to buy this car within the next 6 months or so, when you're working on that kind of timeline, buying into the stock and hoping for the best is not a good idea. That's not gonna. You could very quickly be like, oh, if I wouldn't have bought this stock, I would have had enough. But because I did buy this stock and it went down a bunch, now I can't afford the car. So now I got to wait longer. So that's why we're not putting everything into stock. We do have some stock that we may be willing to sell to take delivery, but we're not putting everything in the EV fund in Tesla stock because the goal is to get the car soon-ish, within the next year or so. Not to, if the goal of this channel was just to make a bunch of money, then yeah, I would throw it all in Tesla stock and wouldn't sell it until maybe 2030. But I'm young, I could afford to hold on to it. I'm sure Tesla stock will be much, much higher by 2040, 2050. Right? Yeah. iKing RPG is the exact mindset of most Tesla bulls. Drew, you don't get it. You're supposed to buy and hold Tesla stock until you're 150. Right. How could I forget? Actually, a lot of bulls, I think, would say hold on to it longer than that. At a certain point, they're going to take cash. That's how you buy the car. So you got to have cash. It's unavoidable. If they let me pay in stock, maybe I would consider buying more stock, but they don't. So, let's see. LiDAR is not a redundant safety mechanism. Legacy OEMs and media try to paint Tesla as taking shortcuts by removing LiDARs to save. They didn't remove LiDAR. They never had it. There was never LiDAR on Teslas. That's what I'm confused by that. People keep saying Tesla removed LiDAR. Derek says, I've had FSD beta for several months now, and I can honestly say I will not use autopilot or TACC in snowy and icy conditions until there are substantial improvements. I have heard concerns about that. He says, when I used it, the car felt like it had no idea what to do and almost hit other drivers. That's why it's not level 3, because Tesla's not confident about it. Trevor Scott says, I've used autopilot and standard FSD on icy roads twice. The car did just fine. Again, this is what we call anecdotal evidence, right? Like if you have two people standing at the number 6, one of them is going to say, that looks like the number 9, and the other one's going to say, that looks like the number 6. Depending on what you experience or how you look at it, we don't know the differences of where these icy roads were tested, how icy they were, what wheels were being used, what cars were being used, what weight it was. There's variables involved, so yes. But unfortunately, even if it works great for Trevor, that doesn't change the fact that if it works poorly for Derek, Tesla's worried about liability, so they are not going to assume fault if something goes wrong. That's why we're still at level 2, despite, I personally think FSD Beta is the best autonomous driving system in the world. Despite the fact I acknowledge, yes, Waymo and Zoox are at a higher level, technically, of autonomy, but that does not make it the better autonomous driving system, because it's extremely limited at that level. Tesla at level 2 is nearing, like, it can almost do everything itself. We are getting some occasional zero intervention drives. They're not most drives, but there are a lot of them. And I would also beg to differ. Well, a lot of those zero disengagements are the car stopping in the middle of the road, and then someone has to take over and park the car on the side. I think a lot of people testing FSD Beta like to leave out that little detail. It's like, look, it drove me there all by itself. It's like, did it back out of the parking space? Did you just get in the car? Or did you have to back out of the parking space, get it onto a public road, and then turn it on? And then it gets there, and then you have to take over and park the car, and then you say, see? Zero interventions. And it's like, there were a couple interventions there. We've still got a long way to go. Like, how long it's taken for Tesla to get turns down and roundabouts, and they're still not done. We haven't even started the process of pulling out of parking spaces, finding a parking space and parking correctly. Auto park is still pretty spotty. So yeah. Let's see. Part of the reason why the wife was okay with us getting the Y was because every Tesla was the safest vehicle on the road, so she felt comfortable with the higher cost as it provided the best safety. I think that's probably the strongest argument you could have for a Tesla, is just that the likelihood of surviving a big crash is much, much higher, and that you can't really put a price on your life. So Trevor says, I live in Texas. We don't get many chances for ice snow, but there are also many FSD beta videos driving in snow ice. Yeah, I've watched Chris's from Dirty Teslas. He's done several, and it's safe to say it's definitely not perfect. He has to take over quite a bit. So I'm sure it's better than it's been in the past, but yeah, I understand why we're not at level 3 yet. And personally, I think there's always these what they're called hype words. There's all these hype words surrounding autonomous driving that Elon loves to use. It's always like, once we get to single stack, once we get to V11, that's everything's going to change at this update. And people get so pumped on Twitter whenever he responds to someone tweet of like, you think this is good, just wait for the next one. You think this is good, just wait for the next. And then we get it, and it's always like pretty much the same reaction, which is like, yeah, okay. It did a little better there, a little worse there. It's still got a long way to go. It's not done. It's not perfect. And then we all say, imagine what it'll be a year from now, right? It's like probably a lot of the same. It's like, yep, that's a little better. That's a little worse. But it's an improvement. It's a very slow process. I see like a huge gap between level 4 and where we are today. Let's see. The vehicles themselves do phenomenal in the snow, much better than any other car or SUV I've ever owned. It's only the software that has hurdles to overcome with what I've experienced. But it is those edge cases that will be holding it back. Solve that, and then everything else is easy. I don't know what else is there if you solve that. That's the edge case, as in what you haven't solved. No, I don't think driving a straight or even curvy road with lines and staying in between the lines and not hitting what's in front of you, that's fairly simple. You know, we've had software that's capable of that for probably over a decade. I get excited for what Elon says because he's a well-accomplished dude who's gotten a lot done, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that his timelines are way off a lot. Elon time is a real thing that we should account for, and it's okay to be excited for something he announces while also admitting that he's probably overly optimistic on the timeline. So I'm a big fan, and I support the pursuit of autonomy. I don't think it's a waste of time like some people do. Some channels out there are like, FSD is a waste. Why does it matter? Who cares? Just let people drive their own car. It's like, no, people die all the time because of how bad human driving is. So I think it's an absolutely admirable and also very profitable if you can figure out ways of monetizing it, even if it's not robo-taxis, because I personally think that's way oversimplified in Elon's head. He's convinced that if they just crack this code and they suddenly get the algorithm down, then all of a sudden all these Teslas will be raking in tens of thousands of dollars a year. I don't think that's going to be as simple as he imagines, but I also just think that selling it as a software package in a vehicle is genius. Of like, it obviously requires a lot of development and it requires a lot of software engineering, and you're going to recoup some of that cost, so it's an upsell. Everyone gets autopilot for free, but just in the business of people paying monthly or paying annually to have a car that can do a lot of the autonomous features all by itself, that's a profitable and admirable business to get in, because as we've seen with miles driven on autopilot, it's much safer than the average human driver. So I say it's worth pursuing. Tesla's doing it better than anyone. I don't think anyone's close, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not going to be done this year. It's not going to be robotaxi by December. It's not happening. I'm sorry. And I'd love to be proven wrong, but I haven't yet. My only exposure to FSD beta is the CNBC video, so it's obviously a death trap. Right, I forgot. I don't even watch those. I heard it was twisted and biased, and I was like, yeah, no thanks. FSD can't drive everywhere in normal conditions. I ain't trusting it in the snow anytime soon. Yeah, that's fair. I remember the Joe Rogan interview where Elon was talking about how he was using V10 and he had 0 interventions and this would solve it all. That didn't happen. That's true. I also remember him hyping up version 10. He was like, oh yeah, it does everything all by itself. It's so easy. I think he's always kind of had that mindset. You know, if you go back in 2015 and 16, he's always like, oh yeah, it'll be done. We're basically there. We're really close. So let's just be realistic about it. I wish Tesla would change their tune. I've always hated the term FSD, especially that F part of it. It's like full self-driving. It's like now you're emphasizing that the car does everything by itself, and it clearly doesn't. It's nowhere near doing everything by itself. It does a lot more than the average car does, but I had nothing wrong with the term enhanced autopilot. I thought that was great. Autopilot in a plane does not mean that the pilot doesn't need to be there. It doesn't mean that a computer can do everything for you. There's still a pilot in the plane, but autopilot kind of keeps you in the direction you're headed, keeps things level, and it keeps the plane from, stalling and doing something crazy. I think that's a perfect definition for how the car software works. It's like, okay, it keeps you going in the right direction. It keeps you in between the lines. It stops you from hitting anything. But full self-driving just gives so much of the impression that the car does everything by itself and you don't have to touch a thing, where the truth is you absolutely need to pay attention. You need to park it. I don't consider it full self-driving when the car just gives up in the middle of the street and then I got to park it myself or I got to get out of the car. That's not full self-driving. Maybe I'd be a little bit more forgiving if it was just self-driving. But I personally think enhanced autopilot is fine. I don't love the term future self-driving because that also implies that one day they will figure it out, and they've been saying that one day they will figure it out for 6 years, and it hasn't happened. So let's not pretend for a second that this is all going to work out. Plane autopilot can literally land and take off on its own, but why is there a pilot there? That's my point. It's like, yes, a Tesla with enhanced autopilot could do auto park. You could go into a parking lot and press the P, and then it will back into a parking space. Does that mean that no one needs to be in the driver's seat? No, you still got to be there. If autopilot in planes was so good that pilots didn't need to exist, they would get rid of the pilot, but they don't for emergencies, for those edge cases that the software can't handle. So I think that's a perfectly adequate term that should stick around. FSD is shorthand for full self-driving capabilities, meaning it will one day have XYZ. I'm just saying you can't promise that because you don't know what the future holds, and they've been saying it will have these features for how many years do we have to go before we acknowledge they don't know how long it's going to take? That's my question. Like, if you've been saying that it will one day do XYZ for 6 years, I don't think we should assume you know if it's going to do XYZ. Semi-autonomous driving. It's too many syllables. Just autopilot's fine. 14 months since beta came out, 10 left in the year. We will agree to disagree. I know, but I've seen the beta get worse on several updates where it's like, oh, this is actually, like Mike in the Bay Area has told me that he got beta 10.10.2 and it's the worst it's ever been. He said he's never had an update this bad. And this is the latest update. So sometimes you get updates that fix a lot of things. Sometimes you get updates that break a lot of things. So it's not like every single version is better than the last version. As much as people like to say that, it's not always true. V11 and single stack is so important, though. It's so exciting once FSD stack works on highway and even when using Smart Summon. I know Elon's hyped that up a lot, and I've heard that of like, oh, this is the game changer. But again, he said this exact same stuff on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was like, V10, so little interventions. It's so good. It's so that now he's saying V11, this is it. This is going to be the big rewrite. The truth is, even when the concept of single stack doesn't simplify much, in my opinion. Single stack just means that you don't have to reboot the computer when the car gets on an on-ramp or when it takes an off-ramp. Going from highway to city driving, it doesn't have to recalibrate like it does now. We're seeing all kinds of issues with the beta not on the freeway. Like we need to take over in icy conditions and bad weather conditions in city streets. Single stack just means that, okay, it's going to be a smoother transition from highway to city driving. That doesn't really fix what most of the interventions are. That's not where the majority of problems with the beta is transitioning from highway to, that's relatively simple. You got a ramp, stay in between the lines, accelerate, don't hit anything. It's all the pedestrians and crosswalks and tight turns and curbs and all those little details that it still has a long way to go. Yeah, like Barron says, FSD can't drive everywhere in normal conditions, so that's fair. I honestly just want better Smart Summon and Smart Park. Yeah, those still have a way to go. Only Tesla has access to the data, how many interventions per mile, so only they can see the improvements overall. 110, 100 videos on YouTube is not nearly enough. Right, but I'm sure the data for Tesla is not inherently always going down. Just like any analytics, sometimes you do things and they go up, sometimes they go down. So you're tinkering with the algorithm, you're tinkering with the software, and you're seeing what causes it to go down. The general trend might be overall down, But if it's still making critical mistakes and everyday people are picking up on it, then that's going to be a holdup. That's why I'm saying we've got a ways to go. I'm not saying it'll never be safer than a human. I'm just saying it's going to take a while. It's going to take time. V12, V13, V14, and V15 will be the one to work for sure. Yeah. Once V11 is out in everyone's car, he's going to be like, I have V12 on the internal build, and it's amazing. FSD drives smoother, quicker, and sees more than current navigate on autopilot. Well, how do you know if you can't use it on the freeway yet? But yeah, that's not the limiting factor. The thing preventing wide release is not how it performs on the freeway quite yet. The whole operation works exponentially. We are in the 2018 Model 3 days right now, still. Yeah, I guess that was kind of the production hell, wasn't it? If Smart Summon actually worked, FSD would probably be worth it more. That's true. Dirty Tesla said it best. If it's new, then there is still a learning curve and it has to go through it. Once Dojo is online for a while, things will improve drastically. Again, that's another hype word I've heard many times. I've also heard Elon say many times that they don't need Dojo to make FSD better than a human, but also Dojo is coming online, which will make it grow a lot faster. People expect perfection from FSD. That will never happen. Have you seen people drive? I don't expect perfection. That will never happen, but I do think that it should be able to at least 95, 98% of the time get from point A to point B with zero interventions before it goes to a wider release. Probably more like 99. And we're not seeing that right now. I wouldn't even say we're at like 80% zero intervention drives. So there's got to be edge cases, but they've got to be rare. They've got to be incredibly hard to find. And right now they're incredibly easy to find. I don't know why every EV stream divulges into this. I feel like every time I go live on EV, we always get into the weeds on definitions and terminologies and all that jazz. I don't want to sound like the skeptic. I'm excited. I'm pumped. I'm pumped that I'm grateful for you guys super chatting and watching the videos and watching the live streams, because it's kind of surreal. Like, we've hit the Tesla fund hit $35,000. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. That's more money than I've spent on any Apple product in my entire life. That's for sure. I gotta say that because there are Apple products that cost more than that. But you know what's funny is Lucid is getting into the same market as Apple because their merch page now has like a polishing cloth. So Apple had like the $20 polishing cloth. Now Lucid has a polishing cloth, which is kind of cool. But yeah, like I don't know. I'm kind of leaning at this point a little bit more towards Model 3 because the more we hear about the 4680 Model Y, the less exciting it is. Like, in the last earnings call, they mentioned that Giga Texas is just going to prioritize the East Coast. And now Troy Teslike did this breakdown on the watt hours per battery. And now he's saying that he expects the range of the 4680 Model Y to be almost exactly the same range as the Fremont Model Y. There's got to be some weight savings in there, but if it's going to only be on the East Coast and you're not going to know which one you're ordering, like, there's no way to specify, I want this Model Y, kind of makes it a difficult, because then the only differences in my view between the lithium iron phosphate Model 3 and the 4680 Model Y is to me the range difference is non-existent, especially when planning trips with a better route planner. It's essentially you get there in the same amount of time, and because it's a nickel-based battery, you charge it to 80% every day, not 100, which means that if the range is 330, then you're starting, whether you have a lithium iron phosphate Model 3 or a long-range Model Y, you're starting from your house for daily driving at 270, 280. There's not a huge difference in your daily driving. And on road trips, it doesn't really result in you get there way faster with the long range. You might get there like 5 minutes, 10 minutes faster than the lithium iron phosphate version. So it's like the only difference is between $14,000 of these two vehicles is the cargo space and the HEPA filter and the higher ride height. I guess the tow hitch option if you want that, but that makes it a $15,000 price difference. After sales tax, actually, it is closer to like $16,000 between those two. So that's definitely making me lean a bit more towards the Model 3 of like, we own and drive a sedan currently, and that covers our needs. And I agree, the Model Y is better. It's a better vehicle just in terms of practicality. The hatchback design is better, and you can do car camping a lot better with that larger back half. But just $15,000 though, that's a lot of money. That's more than FSD. You could buy FSD and you'd still be spending less money overall. Model Y 4680 would have better acceleration, right? Less weight, I would assume, yeah. Although they can tinker that as much as they want. They can software limit the acceleration to be the same, and then only 4680 Model Ys will get an acceleration package that you can pay extra for, and that makes them faster than the Fremont ones. But let's see. If you're buying a 3, are you getting a standard range all-wheel drive? Wait, what? There's no standard range all-wheel drive. The best one ever, the now discontinued long-range all-wheel. I don't think you're using your acronyms correctly, Baron. Do you mean rear-wheel drive? Yeah, I think you said all-wheel drive each time. But, yeah, I think people have the range number built up in their head a little too much. On the subject of Lucid in their first recall, people really love that number, 500-mile range. The number of use cases where that actually makes a big difference, I think, is actually pretty low. For daily driving, it makes very little difference. And on road trips, you don't actually save that much time. I think people just like having the range number in their head because they just imagine, okay, I charge it up all the way. How far can I go before I need to charge again? Where in reality, it's just not how EVs are going to work. It's more about charging until you have enough range to get to your next stop. Therefore, once you have over 250 miles of range, kind of all just mellows out. It all just kind of turns into, okay, after a couple hours you're going to charge and you'll get where you need to go. And the guy with twice the range is going to get to that destination less than an hour faster, but he'll spend 4 times as much. So yeah, no Aptera Tesla news, but even if they don't, all it would take is an adapter. Well, Tesla has acknowledged that they want their superchargers to charge all EVs eventually. It's just a matter of time. So that technically does mean that, yeah, theoretically the Aptera should supercharge. But Model X 6-seater with white interior is a thing of beauty and a beast of a performance. The way the rear seats are implanted to the chassis is amazing. That's my dream car, Adam. I don't know if that's what you have and that's why you're bragging about it, but reach out to me, anyone, if they want to meet up and you have a refreshed Model S and X, because test drives are impossible, and I would love to try out the yoke, and I want to feel the plaid acceleration, even though it'd probably make me sick. But yeah, we have to unfortunately stop using the term standard range, Baron, because Tesla doesn't use, it's technically not called a standard range Model 3 anymore. I know that's what people call it, but it's just Model 3 rear-wheel drive. That's the one we're eyeing right now, just because the value is just too good, like pricing wise compared to everything else. Sure, like the long range Model 3 sounds really good on paper because you're like, wow, 358 mile range for 51 grand. That's a really long range. And I think the bad mental trap I found myself in was wanting to tell people in conversation, because when you get a Tesla and you drive it to different social gatherings and stuff, people are going to ask questions about it. And that's going to come up. Someone's going to ask, how far can it go? If you say over 350 miles, people are going to go, oh, that's pretty good. That's close to my gas car, or that's about what my gas car does. If you say 250, 270, people are going to be like, ooh, okay. So you spent a lot of money on that car, and it doesn't even go, as far as my cheap couple $1,000 car. So I felt like that was the mental, maybe it was subconscious at first, but it slowly came to light. I was like, I think the only reason I would opt for the long range is just so I could tell people that the range is high. But that's like on a practical level, it wouldn't really result in you getting to your destination much faster. And on daily driving, you're not going to notice it because you charge to 80% anyway, which is very close to the 100% daily charging of the lithium iron phosphate. So I was like, I don't really care about acceleration either. It doesn't snow, it doesn't get icy where I live, so I don't need all wheel drive. Maybe if I was road tripping more, I would run into that situation, but I don't know. We actually don't know if you can charge 4680s to 100% daily. That is not confirmed. We don't have data on that. We are aware that the cycle life should be better on 4680s, but we're not sure if 100% daily charging is good for it. That the iron phosphate chemistry is quite a bit different. I actually think the 4680 batteries have more in common with the 2170s than they do the lithium iron phosphate, because with the iron based cathode, it actually is bad for the battery to not be charged to 100% every so often. That was a big mistake I made in my video, so I apologize for that. But a lot of people corrected me. They were like, Drew, it's actually dangerous. Like the battery loses some of its charge capacity if it is not charged up to 100% that often. Whereas with 2170 cells, that's not the case at all. You could never hit 100% in the battery pack would be great. So I'm not entirely sure. Everyone I know who's gotten the standard range, or the rear-wheel drive, I should say, is very happy with it. I don't know that many people that are like, I wish I got the long range. I think Graham Stephan on YouTube said that, but that's the only person I can think of. I get why you don't care about range for your use case. Yeah, range is nice for making separate longest drives in a day where you don't have chargers at destinations. As a coaster enthusiast, I need like 400-mile range-ish for it to be usable. Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, where I live, there's a ton of chargers, and I am not driving huge distances every day. I mean, we want to do road trips with it, but I know a ton of people that road trip with the standard range. Jackson says, I do not want to spread misinformation, but rumors say gas prices could go up to $7 a gallon in USA very soon. Do you think this will increase EV sales? God, I hope not. EV sales are high enough as is. We don't need more. That sounds too high, so I'm going to say that's probably not going to happen. But they're already very high where I live. They've gone up a lot. If you had to charge only 80% daily, then max range should be 450, so daily range would be 360 miles. Wait, what are you talking about? On the Lucid? Let's see. 4680 will be better in the winter. It's more than just range. It's the knowledge of knowing your battery will have a better lifespan. You can deplete and then fully charge without being as cautious. I think that's one of the reasons I like lithium iron phosphate, is because it can go up to 100% frequently. So you can not worry about charging it too high all the time, which is something a bit more of a concern of like, don't leave it at 100% for too long. Keep it to 80, keep it to 90. If it's LFP, it just go up all the way every time. Every time charge it to 100. I need at minimum 300 miles because of all the fun destinations around me. Have no chargers. The second nearest charger, I'm 40 miles away in another state. There's only 2 superchargers in Puerto Rico, but we found several Teslas on the opposite side of the island. Several of which were not long range, I could tell, because they didn't have the badge. So, yeah. I think that a lot of people are convinced they need a certain range until they might try a lower range. But maybe I should put my money where my mouth is. If I actually have an LFP Model 3, I could actually make the use case as to why if you should only be spending extra money on that extra range if you're absolutely certain you need it. Doesn't range capacity decrease over the years? Yes, but lithium iron phosphate decreases at a very low speed compared to the nickel-based cathodes of the 2170s and 4680s. So basically, your long-range Model 3 and Y, the battery will degrade much faster than that of the rear-wheel drive Model 3. The question I've been asking for a while that I haven't gotten an answer on is, will the range degradation of a 2170 battery pack eventually dip below the total range of a LFP battery pack? Like, could the battery health age so well that you actually can go further with an LFP, even though on day one, the long range obviously went much further. Um, let's see. I noticed supercharging in my area went from 29 cents to 34 cents per kilowatt hour. Do you think it'll be a norm for supercharging to go up in price like gas? As long as there's inflation, prices will go up. And right now, there's definitely a lot of inflation. So get used to that. Um, but just because of the fundamental infrastructure required to charge a battery versus to fill a car with gas, I'm pretty sure it will always be cheaper than gas. Um, what's the Model X update about? I don't know. Do you follow anything with Damon? I can't remember if you made it. I do not. Sorry, I don't know much about that. My biggest 4680 concern is after collision damage, would entire pack require replacement if damaged since it's structural? Because it's structural, if there is a collision with a 4680 battery that damages the battery pack, it's the type of collision that would have totaled a normal vehicle anyway. I think a lot of people forget about that. It was a similar concern with the casting press of like combining all of these components into one part. People were like, well, now if that part gets damaged, you need to replace this, the entire car. And it's like, with that kind of damage in an accident, even if it wasn't a casting piece, it would still be totaled. That kind of damage is not the kind you can swap a part out and swap it in. It's structural damage. Same thing with like Trevor said. In a crash, it can be replaced, but they probably just total the cars. It's more work to just replace the 4680. That's Tesla's goal, I think, at the end of the day, is to have a production rate so good and to be able to mass produce vehicles so affordably that it's, rather than make a bunch of modules that can be replaced in a bunch of packs that you can take out and parts that are replaceable. Instead, it's cheaper to just get a whole new car, because that will get the customer back in a vehicle driving around quicker than trying to spend all the time fixing everything. And then you just take all of the valuable components from the totaled vehicle. So when your Tesla gets totaled in a crash, you just take those batteries, recycle the parts, redwood material style, you melt it all down and you get it to its raw materials, rather than try to make use of half of the parts and replace half of the parts. That's just too much complexity. At some points, NCA will dip below LFP, hence LFP will last a lot longer theoretically. I haven't heard that from a battery expert. That's just a theory of mine. I'm like, if I owned a Model 3 long range for 10 years or 15 or 20 years, would its total range be lower than that of a lithium iron phosphate version, which retains its 100% for a long time? I don't know. I don't even know if Tesla knows, because they might not have enough data on that to know how it's going to age. But I bet it's close. I have a feeling that, based on most of the reviews I've seen of people who have bought long-range Teslas with the 2170 cells, they see the degradation drop off a lot in the first year, and then it, goes a little bit year by year. So that range difference of, LFP Model 3 is at 270, long-range Model 3 is at 350. You got 60 mile range, 60 or 70 mile range difference within the first couple of years. I bet that range difference turns into more like 50 miles, and over time it might turn into like a 40-mile range difference, and that difference in how far the car can go on a full charge gets closer and closer together. The question that I'm wondering is, will LFP ever surpass it? Is the degradation that bad? I'm not sure. I feel like making you buy a whole new car rather than repairing old cars contradictory to their environmental stance. No, it's not making you buy a whole new one. It's an insurance thing. If it's your fault, then it's your fault. Yeah, you gotta either get a new one, but the passive and active safety systems on the Tesla are gonna make it so rare and so hard for you to be at fault. If someone else hits you, then they'll just get you a new car. But there are definitely inherently a lot of things that can be done at scale and can be made affordably that are not built to be repairable and modular. A good example is AirPods or Apple Watches. You don't do very much repairs or replace individual components or replace individual parts on little electronics like AirPods and Apple Watches, but Apple's able to build them at scale and mass produce them at high volume so that they can sell them at a low price. Yes, that did come at the cost of they're not very repairable and they're not very modular, but I think it could be a very similar thing with Teslas. I personally think the structural battery pack will not be as repairable. It won't be as easy to replace. Same thing with the casting pieces, but as we're seeing with traditional vehicles, if the structure of the chassis gets that kind of damage, it would have been totaled anyway. And going through the process of repairing and fixing the whole thing is just going to be very time consuming. And sure, maybe someone could do it themselves if they're handy, but the process of paying someone else to do it is just going to cost way more than just building a whole new one or buying a new one. Um, I'm pretty sure in 15 years, LFP would at least have degraded 10%. LFP doesn't mean it never degrades. No, I'm not. I'm not arguing never. I'm just saying the rate of degradation is definitely slower than that of nickel based. EVs that are totaled can have the batteries reused in other applications like a power wall as long as they are usable still. One or two bad cells modules doesn't make the rest bad. It's true. They can have a second life, but people were just saying it goes against their environmental thing though, because it's more replaceful to it could because it's more wasteful to replace than repair. But yeah, I get what you're saying. We're not saying take the totaled vehicle and throw it in a dump. That's not the answer. It's just instead of individually trying to finnick around with, well, this whole casting piece is dented, so now I'm just going to try to dent it into place or disconnect the entire casting piece and then hope Tesla ships me an individual component of that back casting piece so that I can put everything in myself. No, instead, melt it down to its raw materials, harness the valuables out of it, and put that into new thing. It's not wasteful. Basically, to say you can make something that's not repairable but still good for the environment. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I personally think that there are ways of making something. It's like, okay, you can't replace every component and it's not super easy to work on, but it is still better for the environment as a whole. 4680s and Powerwalls eventually, that would be interesting. Elon said there's not much, in the last earnings call at least, I think it was Drew Baglino who actually answered the question saying that it doesn't make as much sense to do 4680s. They're very helpful for low weight, high energy density, which is not the target purpose of Powerwalls and Megapack. When you're making a Powerwall or a Megapack, it's something that's going to be bolted to a wall sitting at a house or sitting on a concrete slab. So what's going to matter more there is how cheap you can make it and how many you can make. The biggest issue with Powerwalls is that they can't meet demand for them and they're super backordered. So if you're using lithium iron phosphate, you can make them for much cheaper and you can make them a lot faster. And yes, LFP is less energy dense, and it's not as you can't store as much energy in them, but you can make it for a lot cheaper, and you can charge it to 100% with a power wall. That would be helpful to go all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. 4680s are going to be more helpful for when you're putting batteries in a moving object like a car, and you want it to have a high range, even if it's a high mass. So something like the Tesla Semi has got to move a lot of mass, and it can't weigh very much, otherwise the payload capacity is lower. So it makes a lot of sense in a long-range Model Y or a long-range Model 3 or a Cybertruck. I don't think you can do a Cybertruck without 4680 batteries. So in those type of applications, it makes a ton of sense. But a Powerwall or a Megapack, yeah. But by your logic, second life for a 4680 battery would be Powerwall / Megapack. Melting it down and trying to reclaim the cathode and anode would be tough. Well, that's what Redwood Materials is specializing in. JB Straubel. Sorry, I'm pronouncing it wrong. I know. But that's what they specialize in is melting down batteries to their raw materials, and they're actually already profitable. And they don't even have that many battery packs to pull from. Tesla themselves has already started recycling old battery packs, so it's a process, sure, but it's probably, in my view, going to be nickel is a very valuable cathode material, nickel and manganese. So melting those down and turning them into new batteries is going to be, I think, a lot more profitable for Tesla than throwing them in Powerwalls and Megapacks, because iron is incredibly plentiful. So if you're mass producing and building up a ton of iron-based batteries, that's going to be way, way cheaper than taking your valuable energy dense 4680s in their second life and turning them into something that's stationary. I bought my car in Texas. You just can't go to a Tesla dealership and give them money and get a car. It's all done online. Right. The Tesla can't sell in Texas, but it is a little confusing. Derek says, funny story, Drew. I found you because of your Lewis Rossman drama. Yeah, a lot of people did, actually. He says, have you looked into doing anything else with him in constructive manner since those events? I'm sure he's a busy guy. I did reach out to him a couple years ago after the whole back and forth we had and just said, you know, you want to do an interview or do you want to do a podcast or something? And I didn't hear back. So I didn't take offense to that. I'm sure the guy's just busy. But yeah, he's a very talented repair guy. He knows a lot about repair. And I don't, I'm not as interested in that field of technology, but that's a good guy to watch if you're into teardowns or self-fixing stuff and DIY and that kind of stuff. Plaid doesn't need 4680. They can make more using 1865 cells. Monroe said the battery pack was fine. Well, yeah, actually, Monroe was impressed with the new battery pack despite it using the old cells. But I still agree. It would be cool for anything to get 4680s. Like, yeah, it was a long time ago. Don't worry about it. If we had the structural battery pack and the single piece castings on the Plaid Model S, I think that's how they were calculating the original Plaid Model S. They said it would have over 520 miles of range. With 4680s, I think it probably would. The amount of space they have in there, Model S is a big car, and the amount of weight savings you could have with a structural pack and how many cells you could line up, and I know how much more energy dense those batteries are. I think 520 mile range would be pretty epic. I mean, not super useful, but still cool. No one's going to complain that their car goes further. You know, that's kind of nice. I think Elon's going to win the Solar City lawsuit? Probably. Cybertruck deliveries apparently are starting based on location. That's only a rumor that I've heard, like Texas owners will be first. Well, I probably started that rumor. I remember saying that back when the Cybertruck first came out, because when the Model Y launched, they did not deliver Model Y based on who ordered first. I try to remind everyone of that. They're like, oh yeah, I got a Cybertruck order in day one. I'm like a first hour reservation holder. And I'm like, there were people that ordered a Model Y like a month before it came out, and they got it sooner than people who ordered on launch day when they first unveiled it. There were people that ordered that. It was all based on who was closest to the Fremont factory, because it's much cheaper for Tesla to deliver those vehicles nearby first, instead of just being like, oh, okay, the first person to order a Model Y was in New York City. I guess all the Model Ys got to drive out there. The first deliveries, we got to ship them all the way out there. So no, they go based on, it's not really a rumor. It's just kind of how Tesla has done things in the past. It's not like iPhones. It's not like electronics where they like prioritize or video game sales where they're like, well, first order gets the first vehicle, second order gets the second vehicle, third order no, it just goes based on who's closest to the factory usually. Roughly. Sometimes they go a little bit wider, but yeah. Have you seen the Arcimoto Lean Mean Machine? No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I haven't followed them closely. If I don't answer your question right away, it's probably because I don't have an answer. Tesla just wants to make money. They're not doing this because it's safer. That's just an argument that they can use. What? It doesn't matter if there's data that proves it's safer, or... No, just ignore the data. It's all about money. They just care about money. Let's see. That would be one hell of a flagship with a 520 mile range that goes 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. That would be awesome. I'd love it. Hey, thanks for the super chat, Rockford Media. It says, hey, Drew, looking forward to Monday. That reminds me, I need to thank... Rockford Media has just become a member of the Executive Tesla Fund, so I appreciate that. But before I forget, as we wrap up here... Oh, no! Oh, my goodness. Why did the phone fall? I guess because I bumped the desk. That'll do it, huh? It's balancing very delicately on a HomePod. It's okay. Drew. What was that? Oh, it's my water bottle. Wonder what that looked like. Okay. Once again, very special thank you to Joshua Vinnick, Martin Turner, Wojciech Kaminski, Planet Text, Dr. Mark Choi, and Rockford Media Matt for supporting the Patreon. Bennett Williams, Dylan Zimmer, Jacob Hallbach, Joshua Levitsky, all the Joshuas. I appreciate you guys for your support and for helping us reach $35,000 in the Tesla fund as of right now. That does not include stock. That is just cash. We may be willing to sell some of the stock in order of reaching our goal, but thank God the iPhone has a structural battery pack. That way it didn't break. It's much more expensive and complicated to transport cars than phones. That's very much true. Looking forward to Monday as well. Tesla won against all, even a Taycan Turbo. Of course. Of course it won. It's a Tesla. Why wouldn't it? Apparently the Hummer EV has a 214 kilowatt hour battery. That thing is a tank. Weighs over 9,000 pounds. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all, actually, knowing... I thought it was 200 kilowatts and then kilowatt hours, and then it was kind of surprising to find out that they went to 214. Over 200 kilowatt hour battery pack. That is like probably the biggest battery pack you can buy as a consumer. You probably don't count Mega Pack. That's like a business thing. Does anyone know of another way you can get a single battery that large? He has the same whiteboard. Nice. Awesome. Thank you for the super chat. For those unaware, all the super chats are going to the Tesla fund, so appreciate it. You got to put that whiteboard in your passenger seat when you get one. Yeah, we'll read off some other way. Maybe I'll throw all the names in the frunk or something, but every day getting more excited, and I'm looking forward to it more and more. I kind of like how stupid the Hummer is. It's charming in a way. Yeah, I think it's definitely in its character. It's just the fact that GM makes it and the administration thinks that they're leading the transition with the Hummer makes it a little bit harder to like. But yeah, it's definitely weird that like the vehicle known for being inefficient and bulky and they stopped making it because no one was buying them. And they wanted to bring that back for their electric vehicle. It's like, yeah, the inefficient one. Let's start with that. It's like, yeah, it's the most inefficient EV of all time, by far. I think it has 43 miles per gallon equivalent, which is not good at all. That's like the worst efficiency I've ever seen in an EV. Still technically better than any gas car, though. Even a very efficient aerodynamic gas car is going to be worse for the environment than the Hummer, technically. Let's see. Talos, it fails. Yeah. I don't know why that happened. I just got up and then the phone fell over. It's just the Ultium platform. They basically turn the individual modules 90 degrees so that they can fit more cells. Oh, God. It's just not going to be a very scalable solution. I try to remind companies of that. Like, this isn't going to ramp up well if your solution to more range is just throw more batteries. Put more batteries in it. Let's just throw more batteries in it. That's why we need things like structural pack, casting press technology, and 4680s. And, we're going to need aerodynamic benefits. And that's why I'm such a big fan of Aptera as well. The Hummer has never sold well, and I'm talking about the gasoline ones, let alone this abomination they call them. You keep calling it Hammer. That must be autocorrect. But yeah, it's never been a top seller, so it still won't. GM made one of the first EVs, then intentionally killed it so they could keep selling gas cars, and now, like 30 years later, they're like, well, actually, we're back. I know. It's so corporate. It's so, like, dishonest. It feels so big, ugly business that care about money. Now, I guess we were right in the first place. We got to prioritize EVs. So, yeah, it's hard to get excited for, even though I actually, when I was real little, I used to like Hummers. I thought they were cool. And then I sat in one and I was like, oh, this is stupid. When I was a kid, Tesla wasn't even a thing when I was really, really little. Before I knew about like electric cars being real, my two favorite vehicles, I had little toys when I was a kid. I had a toy Lamborghini, and I still honestly think Lamborghinis look kind of cool, and a Hummer, and I would play with those two. So I thought those were the coolest cars. And whenever I saw one, I would be like, oh, look, a Hummer. Oh, wow, and a Lamborghini. Now, I would much rather have the cheapest, most basic $45,000 Model 3 over any of those vehicles. Even, like, assuming I'm not allowed to sell them, if someone was like, Drew, you can either have a Hummer, a Lamborghini, or a lithium iron phosphate Model 3, what would you have? I would definitely take the Model 3. But when I was a kid, I just thought it was like, ooh, cool, big, beefy car. Wow. So there's a little bit of nostalgia there for me. But again, once I actually checked out one, I was like, oh, this sucks. I would never buy one. Let's see. Oh, wow. Sid says he was a tank commander in 1987. That's awesome. Thank you for your service. Yeah. Trevor Scott says the only military experience I had was 4 years in the Corps of Cadets. Ultimately decided not to go into service. Okay, gotcha. Adam says, me too. For some reason, I love the Hummers. I think it makes a better kid's toy than it does an actual vehicle. They don't have a lot of space for storage, and the visibility is terrible, and I'm sure they're a headache to park. So, yeah, it's just terribly inefficient. So I know that the cost of charging or filling up a Hummer is going to be insane. So it's just not worth it. But anyway, I appreciate all of the Patreon support. Thank you guys for helping us save up. I'm looking forward to the videos we'll make with it. I got to get going here, but I do have a video ready to go. Let me see. Oh man, I got to set the thumbnail. Whoops. I got to add a couple things to the description, but screw it. You know what? Since the live stream is ending, I'm just going to go ahead and post it right now. That way, as I sign off, you guys have something to enjoy. But yeah, as mentioned earlier in the chat, there's been some upgrades. There's some changes coming to the Model S and X lately. So I did a video breaking down the changes, so you can go check it out now. Appreciate you all for watching. Have a great, excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.